Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Stateside Market Report with Bryant and Tim. Bryant, how are you?
Pretty good, Sam. How are you?
Doing well. Digging into some geeky numbers here that we're getting for some of our lenders. I think we'll talk a little bit today about we'll talk a little bit about rates, but I think we saw some interesting things that kind of surprised both of us in terms of, I guess, just optimism in the market. And
Mm,
it's really encouraging to see that, especially in the building space, since we've talked on previous episodes about how we've been kind of behind the eight ball as a country in building since the early 1960s. And we talk scarcity, 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 inventory, inventory. And the solution to that is more houses. So to see builder sentiment go up, and we'll get into some of these numbers, is really encouraging, especially in this market in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, where there's just not enough houses for people that want them. This is obviously nationwide math, but at the same time, hopefully it'll trickle down to this market as well, and we can see some new builds, more houses for people.
yeah, yeah, that's I absolutely, absolutely agree with that, Sam. Uh, yeah, there is it was surprisingly a lot of optimism in the housing market. A little surprised by those numbers, right? Because
Yeah,
all the doom and gloom in the news and all over the media is saying, there's the housing market crash, all this, but from what we're seeing in this report that our lenders gave to us, there's a lot of optimism in the market, right? And there's a few different things I want to touch on, in particular, the mortgage application submissions.
yeah. Let's
That
talk
I'd
about
like
that.
to I'd like to dig a little deeper into that. I think it's a great indication. Same with what I like them all. Same with housing starts. Same with building permits, right? Like those, if those go up, that's saying that the housing market is strong, right?
Yeah,
Because if they're going down, it means people are scared and nobody wants to build houses. Contractors don't want to build houses because they don't want to be left with this inventory in their pockets while they're waiting for someone to come along and buy it, right? So they're building houses, which, I mean, on the flip side of things, we are like what, 4 million houses short in the United
right.
States for inventory. So that's not too surprising, but just the fact that they are building shows me that they're confident in the money that they're putting into building these houses they're going to see on the back end, right? There's not going to be like this severe decrease in the home values where they're working for free or they're spending money to build these houses. That doesn't make any sense. So
Totally.
I thought
And I
that was
mean that
cool.
that's a lot of what happened in 2008 was these people just got, they saw what everyone was getting a mortgage, everyone could get a house, everyone was paying over value.
Yeah.
And then the subprime mortgage bubble bust. And then all these people, these builders were just left with, I mean, there's stories in Arizona and Phoenix where it's just rows and rows, neighborhoods of empty houses that were built and just unoccupied and people lost millions. So the fact that builders are getting permits shows that they don't foresee that happening again, which, obviously we've been kind of banging on that drum for a while that this is not the same as 2008. This whole thing is based on inventory. So yeah, it's really encouraging. And these numbers surprise both of us. The fact that mortgage applications are up over 7% week over week. Building permits are up over 10%. There's all kinds of little nerdy numbers that you can dig into that just show the overall. And again, we want to reiterate, you don't have to be an expert on all these numbers. So you can kind of tune in and keep it in the back of your head. Oh, this is good, this is bad, but just kind of see these indicators in terms of dealing with how you think the market is performing. And sentiment is big. I mean, just interest rates we see. We can talk about that all day, every week, but no one wants to hear that. Overall, I think it's important to realize that about year over year, we're at about 2 to 2.5% higher than we were a year ago today on all products. 30-year conventional, 15-year conventional, VA loans, kind of across the board, we're about 2% higher, which is significant. And everyone knows that. I mean, that's not news, but it's also not double. You know what I mean? We're not talking 4% higher. It's right where it's supposed to be historically. So you kind of have to put all this into a stew of what is this telling me and stuff like that. And this is obviously for people that are looking to buy or sell houses. Put all this together, see how all these macro factors affect your purchase power, as well as what could be coming down the pike. And again, I think it goes back to the DMV market is incredibly robust. It's not going anywhere. It's very resilient. It's not privy to these peaks and valleys that a lot of markets in the nation are prone to. And I think that the builder sentiment and the mortgage applications going up, I think people are starting to get back to this is normal. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? This is
I
the new
agree.
normal. There's no more 3 and 4%. we're at 5.5, 6.5, 7% sometimes, and that's just what it is now. I still need to move,
Hmm.
or I still need to grow my portfolio as an investor. There's just different moves you need to make and different calculations you need to do. And people waiting for that 4% to come back are just finally saying, I don't see it.
Yeah, they're getting
And
behind the eight ball there. Yeah, it's
right,
just
the math points to it. So
yeah, and I've actually seen articles talking about how the federal government is never going to go down to the 2.5, 3% range again with
mm,
interest rates, unless we have to, right? Unless we really, we had have another pandemic.
sure.
But they're learning that because they did that, so many people locked in such low rates. Nobody wants to move. Nobody wants to put their houses up for sale. It's had this rippling effect in the economy
Yeah.
since it happened. So they're like, listen, we just can't. I mean, if your interest rate is lower than inflation, you're getting paid to own a house essentially, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's like it's hard to give that up, right? Anybody that has if somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about moving, I want to sell my house, like, well, what interest rate do you have? Oh, I have 2.8. Like, do everything in your power to keep that house because you're
Right.
legitimately being paid by the government to own
Coming from realtors, that's hard for us to say, but it's true. I mean, we work in our clients' best interest, and like they're calling it the great rate
Absolutely.
lockdown. Like if you're locked in under 3%, it's got to be really, really enticing for you to move and pick up a mortgage at 6.5.
Yeah. Or
Um,
just, do something different. Like if you've owned it long enough, you can, pull some money out of it, do a HELOC to put a down payment on your next house, right? If you need the money, uh, but then rent it out and, start, building up a little portfolio that way, some passive income. So it's hard. It's difficult to wrap your head around. And anybody that's going to be waiting around, and I have had clients that are like, well, I'm going to wait until I really want a 4% interest rate. It's like it's just I don't know how to get it across to you that like by the time that interest rate rolls around again, if it ever does, you're gonna look at home price and be like, oh man, I should have bought 7 years ago, even
right.
though interest rates were a little higher. I should have bought because now that $700,000 house is now 1.1 million,
Exactly.
and I feel left out. Also,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, and I think that's a conversation you need to have. Interest rates are important, but they're not the deciding factor of everything. There's so much at play here, and there's so much strategy involved, and just looking into these things in more detail and talking with folks that know how these things work is super important. Like, what
right?
do you? I mean, forget interest rates. What are you comfortable with paying monthly? Let's fit something in that box. You know what I mean? Let's work from there. Reverse engineer what kind of house you can buy at what
Exactly.
rate in what area, and just be real about it. And I think it's a mindset shift, right? Like if you're dead set on getting that 4% interest rate, you're not going to get it. And
Right.
like you said, if you do, the house is going to be worth twice as much as it was because we're looking at 20 years down the road. I have no idea. Maybe it'll come in 5 years, 3 years. Maybe it'll never come again. We just don't know. And I
Hmm.
think that's the part that kind of incites action because we don't know. You know what I mean? We might miss out on a lower interest rate next week, but it's not going to be huge. We might miss out on a lower interest rate in 2 years, but what are the benefits that real estate can provide for you during those 2 years of waiting? That's it's not, and it's not easy. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's easy. Just flip a switch and go get something. It's a lot of calculation. It's a lot of discussion and strategy and personal risk tolerance. Yeah, so there's a lot to consider, and we talk about
Yeah,
this stuff all the time.
the whole talking about interest rates thing, we just went down into a rabbit hole on that. And
Exactly.
we said we wouldn't. It's there though, right? It's the elephant in the room that everybody is worried about. And honestly, like people don't need to be that worried about it.
No,
I won't we can touch on this on another episode again, but it's not the worst thing, right?
it's
It's
a piece of the pie, and it's historically average, and that's it. So I
Yeah, I
think
bought a house this last in 2022. I have a high interest rate. I still bought a house. I still see the advantages of it. I'm just not telling people to go do it, and I'm not going to do it. I legitimately did it. I got a
right,
5.625 on my house, which I at the time I thought was very high compared to the
right.
threes and fours. I mean, they're higher now, but it's still like it didn't stop me from doing it. Now I'm
No,
glad I did it because interest rates went up. But still,
yeah,
my plan was and still is when interest rates do drop below the interest rate I locked in at, I'm going to refinance and I'm going to buy down as many points as I can and just lock in the lowest rate I can on a 30-year mortgage. And anyways, Bryant.
No rabbit hole, Bryant. We did it. We went down the rabbit hole.
Straight
What we were
down that
supposed to
down
talk
that damn
about
hole.
is
But
that
anyways, let's go. Yeah,
builder
let's go
sentiment
into
is
this.
good. Mortgage applications are up. People are moving. The market
Yes.
it's alive and well, and it's just, all these indicators are good. There's a lot of volatility now with SVB going down and all the kind of banking ripple effect and stuff like that. And that just makes the mortgages really fluctuate from week to week. But again, zooming out and taking a look at the overall status of the market, I mean, it's alive and well. It's healthy. We don't have enough inventory. And the fact that builders are looking to build is huge.
Yeah, it's in all this stuff works together, right? Going back to interest rates, right? Like these lenders they're looking at these kind of stats. The mortgage application rates and the housing starts and the building permits. They're looking at all this data, and if it's showing a trending going upward, they're you know taking that in consideration when they're making the rates, right? Like, hey, economy is moving on. Let's, we don't, it doesn't need to be, it slowed down or whatever, like maybe it has been with the interest rates going
Right.
up. Right. So we're able to see a little bit into the future with, especially with like my favorite thing is like the mortgage application submissions, right? The mortgage bank, what is it? The Mortgage Bankers Association puts out this weekly report saying how many people applied for a mortgage during the last week, right? And that kind of gives us that stat alone just kind of gives us a little look into the future, with, like if there's more people coming on, that's the first thing you do when you go buy a house, right? You got most people anyways, unless you're buying it with cash, have to go get a mortgage. So they start with an application. So if more people are applying for mortgages, that just kind of gives us a glimpse in the future what the market in the short run is for supply and demand chain, right?
Right.
So that's, I
Yeah.
like that. I did a little video on Instagram about it. There's like kind of like a little magic ball. You can see into the future a little bit. If mortgage applications are going down, things are going to start slowing down, right? And I can expect that in my business. Like, hey, less people looking for houses, so I'm going to expect a little dip in my business.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, up 6.5% this week, which is significant, new mortgage applications and refinances. So that, yeah, I mean, all signs point to good stuff. I'm not worried about this market, especially in the DMV. I mean, we have plenty of business and, it's, don't have enough inventory, but the market's alive and well. And I think that, again, we talk about this almost every episode, and one of these days we'll get sick of it. The sky is not falling,
Yeah.
don't read the headlines and just say, oh my God, interest rates are too high and there's no houses. Yeah, walk through it, like see, and that's one of the reasons we make these videos every week is to say, listen, calm down, read some numbers, talk to some folks that know how these things work, and we'll walk you through it. I mean, I think it's super important because we live in a society where it's just kind of sky is falling, bad news, headlines, click here and stuff like that, and people just get scared and freeze, and like that's how you miss opportunities. So I think you're really talking about it and doing your own research and due diligence is super important, which is why we do this. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, we want to share these numbers because they're popping up in our mailboxes, right? We're seeing
People don't
what's on
get
the
it.
headlines on the news and being like, that doesn't make any sense because all of these numbers that we're seeing every day following the market, they're saying other word, right? The housing market sentiment index climbed 2 points in March. I mean, I would have never guessed that watching the
No,
news,
me neither. Right. Exactly. That's a
right?
really good
Like,
point. Yeah.
watching the news, I'm like, oh, less people are excited about the market now,
Yeah.
which because of these news. But overall, people are kind of gaining some momentum in it, which to me again was very surprising to see.
And encouraging. And I mean, I think that's a really good point, Brian, is that like check where you get your information from. We say this on the podcast all the time, and we're not anti-media by any means, but just read a couple sources. Like when you see all these headlines like you can't get a house and all this, well, buyer sentiment increased 2% this week, like that's big. So the numbers sometimes don't back up these headlines, and I think it's really important, especially if you're actively looking. It's like drinking from a fire hose, actively looking to buy or sell. You're just inundated with neighbors information, friends, family, headlines, like it's a lot to digest, and it really helps to kind of parse through it and see which of these theories the math actually backs up, and then go forward with confidence. So I think that's why we do this, because people don't get not access, but people just don't look at the stuff we look at every day.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not
So
like
we're
they
just
don't have
trying to
access to
bring
that
it to the
stuff.
masses, right?
Yeah. It just, if you don't know where to look, or if you're not getting it automatically to your inbox, it just, again, like half this stuff just shows up in my inbox every day. And I'm like, I don't even know how, and we talk about this too. Like,
Interesting.
how did I end up on this, this distro? But
So
hey,
many
anyways, this
lenders,
is some good
right?
information. Guess what?
It's
Like
good
the mortgage
information,
application submissions are up. Look at that. That's awesome.
right?
They're, these people are going and doing all the work for me. I don't have to
Yeah,
go look at it,
we
it's,
just bring it to the people.
and we just bring it
That's
to the
all.
people. You know,
Well, I think that's good. I mean, I think that's a good. We were going to get into other stuff, but we had important things to talk about. So let's leave
yeah.
it there for now. Little
Yeah.
market update.
I think next week we can get into the appraisal contingencies and the financing contingencies and kind of, kind of what touch on them at a broad level, right? We don't have to
Yeah.
get down into the weeds, but kind of what the appraisal contingency means, what when you have it in a contract and when you don't have it in the contract, what are the dangers of that? Um,
Yeah.
I guess a little bit on what loan products actually require
Hmm.
appraisal. So there's some loan that you have to get an appraisal, right? So,
Yep.
anyways, we'll touch on that maybe next week, unless something else falls into our inbox that
Another bank
distracts us and
fails,
feel
something
like it's
else.
more important than appraisals and financing.
That's it. We bring you up to date news and we bring you just kind of general real estate knowledge, and we're bouncing back and forth. And, whatever we feel is most important for folks to know, that's what we'll talk about that week. And hopefully it's helpful. So until next time, we'll talk financing and appraisals, hopefully. Tim Robinson, Brian Naylor, Stateside Market Report. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.